In this version of our quick takes for personality psychology, we are going to talk about why are there so many different personality theories. You've probably looked through your textbook or looked through the class and wondered why is it that there are so many different theories as to what personality is made up of and how personality develops. So let's take a look at what are some of the reasons for that. So our question is, as I said, why are there so many theories? Well, each theorist that we're going to be covering this semester came from a different personal background. And one thing that we know is that as psychologists, our personal values, our personal experiences influence how we perceive the world. And this happens with every human. So when we have different personal backgrounds, then we are going to look at the world differently. We're going to think about people and think about how their personality develops differently. And we're going to do it through the lens of our own personal experience. So we can think about how a theorist's own personal childhood experiences influence the development of their personality theory, because many times they look at their childhood experiences and see how their childhood experiences, or they perceive their childhood experiences influence their personal personality, and they expect that that happens to other people as well. Many of these folks that we're going to study also have observed lots of people throughout their lives and have made these observations crystallized into what they think happens to all people. And if you've taken science classes before, you know that a small sample size, unfortunately, or a small number of people that we're studying can create problems in terms of predicting how all people will behave. So childhood experiences of the personality theorist are going to influence their own personality theory. Their interpersonal relationships are going to influence their development of their personality theory. So, for example, their relationship with their primary caregiver, whether it be their mom or their dad. And again, it's going to be their perception of this relationship that influences theory, not any sort of observable behavior that maybe another person might observe. We'll have one theorist that we'll talk about. Her name is Karen Horney, who perceives that her dad treated her very poorly and didn't love her as much as her brothers. And when you take a look at observations from other people have said that he would take her on work trips with him. He was a captain of a ship. He would take her on ships with him. He would bring her back gifts, but her response to her perception was that he was not loving her in the way that she wanted to be loved, and thus he didn't love her as much. So also interpersonal relationships in terms of friendships, in terms of how they were treated by other kids, those can influence how they perceive people in general. We can also talk about history-graded influences. What history-graded influences are basically how the time that you live in history influences your perception of people and the world. So, for example, people that were born before 9/11 occurred may perceive the world differently than people who were born after 9/11 occurred. And so what goes on in history during your formative years and during your life is going to impact your personal background, your personality, your experiences with life, and kind of how you expect other people to behave. So we can also think about how this influences their philosophical orientation towards people. So what I mean by that is they think, we as humans look out at the world and we say, are humans generally good people, or are humans generally bad? Are humans generally, do they have the ability to make their own decisions? Do they have free will? Or are humans generally guided by the requirements of their social environment? So our philosophical backgrounds, those childhood experiences, our experiences with other people are going to influence our philosophy on how we see people. We can also talk about how those experiences are going to influence their unique ways of looking at the world. So we'll talk in a later video about how some people are more humanistic. They have a more positive expectation for humans in general. And they also think that people can change and intentionally make positive change. Whereas there's other theorists that will look at that will think that humans in general are not capable of much change throughout their lifespan, even if they try to. So when we talk about the theories, one of the things that we'll see is that each theorist is going to gather their data to support or refute the theory that they come up with differently. So some people will do so through personal observation, which as scientists in 2021, we may look at that theorist and their personal observations and say, like, that's not sufficient data. But to people prior to the implementation of the strict scientific method for personality theory, it was perfectly sufficient for them to simply look around, observe people, and go like, oh, I think people act in this way. Many of the later theories that we'll study are definitely research-based, but a lot of the initial studies or a lot of the initial theories that we'll look at were very much based on introspection and observation as opposed to scientific data gathering, which is what we now in 2021 are used to. So we can also talk about, let me move my head here, how the theorist's personality, so their own experiences, their own traits, their own characteristics, their own consistent behaviors influence their theory. So this is what we call the psychology of science. So the psychology of science is the empirical study of scientific thought and behavior, including theory construction of the scientist. So when we talk about the psychology of science, we're really talking about how does the personality and the experiences of the individual influence their development of their personality theory or of their theory in general, because it doesn't only apply to personality theory, okay? So when we think about, and this is just summarizing what I just said, sometimes I get ahead of myself. So when we think about the personality of the theorist, so for example, the first theorist that we'll talk about is Sigmund Freud. So when we think about Sigmund Freud's personality, how he always wanted to make a great discovery, how he always felt like a lone wolf and nobody understood him, we can better understand his theory by understanding the personality and experiences that created that personality throughout his life, by studying both his biography and his personality as it went to, or as it influenced his personality development, okay? Or as it influenced, I'm sorry, his personality theory. Okay, so in this class, many times students ask me, why do I have to study the biography of these theorists? Like, why do we care that this person was born in Germany, or that this person had, you know, 2 older half siblings that rejected him, or why do we care about that stuff? Because it's going to impact the development of the personality theory that the theorist is going to come up with. Okay, so our next topic is going to be different historical themes or orientations within all of psychology, not just personality psychology, but we will be focusing on personality psychology for that. So see you next time.